Welcome to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as we welcome back professional endurance athlete and author Travis Macy. Now, we have had the pleasure of talking with Travis on season 5. And what happened on season 5? Well, don't worry. It is still there for you to listen to. So we're not going to break too much into it, but we did have him on season 5 to talk about the latest book he just launched, A Mile at a Time. A father and son's inspiring Alzheimer journey of love, adventure, and hope. Travis Macy has completed over 120 ultra endurance events in 17 countries. He is a highly decorated athlete, but he's also a speaker, an author, a coach, a father, a friend, an uncle, a professional endurance athlete. He has a lot of wisdom to share, and we're delighted to bring him back because he's also the author of The Ultra Mindset, an endurance champion's 8 core principles for success in business, sports, and life, which is exactly what we will be discussing today. Welcome back, Travis.
Well, thanks, Sherry. It's great to be here. I had a fantastic time last time. I am pumped for round 2. It's great to get to reconnect with your audience as well.
Well, that starts it all off right there. If you had fun last time, we're just going to amp it up. And there's no better way than to look at the Ultra Mindset. And having read both books now, first I'm going to compliment you on, they're very engaging because you tell stories that are so true to heart. And when you need to be picked up, because maybe life has a little bit of jagged edges in your world right now and you're listening, these 2 books will help you explore where your mindset is. And I think that's really what the Ultra Mindset book is about. And I don't want you to spill all the juicy details that are in the Ultra Mindset, but can you kind of give our listeners, what is the 60,000 foot view of what an ultra mindset is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to think of that book as a guide, maybe, and it's full of stories. It's full of kind of actionable tools, and it also has worksheets in it. I used to be a high school English teacher, so I couldn't stay away from that book, from actual writing exercises where you can go through and grapple with some of this material. And I actually shared in the book, at that point in my life, this is 2015, which, in some ways is not too long ago. In other ways, like, it was a different phase of life for me. My kids were very young. I was at a different point in my athletic career, professional career, et cetera. But I share snapshots of where I was at, working through those same worksheets. So you actually get to see my answers, for better or worse. But anyway, it's a guide to hopefully developing your own ultra mindset that you can use. If you like what I do in the adventure racing, ultra running, long mountain bike races, pack burro racing, backcountry skiing, if you like this kind of stuff, you can use an ultra mindset for that. There's a good chance that you do other stuff. It's likely that you may have, kind of a key romantic relationship, maybe a family, maybe some kind of business thing, maybe your own fitness or health or exercise goals. And hopefully it's just as relevant to you with whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, for that book, we kind of came up with these, again, 8 principles. Each one starts with hopefully a compelling story from these places around the world where I've, raced and trained and traveled and stuff, and then leads in again to these mindset principles that I like to think are pretty well backed, by science. I'm not a psychologist. I don't claim or try to be one, but I did a lot of research for that book, and we had a good team working on it. And I think we came up with some pretty good stuff.
Well, I would say too that you not only are a ultra marathoner, but you're living the life of someone who is diving deep into their goals and their goal setting.
Mm,
So the book is not just fitted for athletes. It is, like you said, it kind of brings you around into an adventure of what are you thinking now, and then how can you adjust that thinking to elevate it even more. And as we're on
hmm.
adjusted reality, that's one of the keys is where are you now? Where do you want to go? And the
Perfect.
stories are really inspiring. And I know over the course, and it's been some time now, but there probably is some stories in the ultra mindset book that you still carry with you today because they were so either life-changing or they were turnaround points for you. Can you share maybe one or two of those stories that really did bring you to where you are at this time?
Yeah, yeah, I'd be glad to. One that comes to mind, one of the chapter titles is something along the lines of never quit except when it's time to quit. And, that's kind of a bit of a play on words there. But the idea is that, yes, it is very important to, set that goal, commit to it, and work really hard towards it. And remember that it's probably going to take longer than you think it will. And it's going to be harder. And there's going to be, all these setbacks and, people saying you're not going to make it, all that. There's going to be this resistance, right? And the second part, except when it's time to quit, there's a nuance here. There's we have the ability to re-choose things or to try to avoid the sunk cost fallacy, which is, listeners have maybe heard of it. It's what you've put all this time or effort or money into something, let's say a business idea or a career path or whatever it is. And if it's not working out, just because you put so much into it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should still continue with it. So one from my current life, and I talk about this a bit in the book, was the idea to shift from traditional employment, as a W-2 employee. At the time, I was a high school teacher, into self-employment. And my wife and I actually both did that simultaneously. We had a 1 year old and a 3 year old and a mortgage and, all the usual, just sort of accoutrements of adult life, if you will. We were up against challenges like health insurance, right? What are we going to do for health insurance? And we with kids, we were going to not have health insurance, and I quickly found, well, this is going to be, at least $1,000 a month, likely more, just in health insurance premiums. So again, there's all these barriers, and there is, many people would say, there's the risk. What is the risk of leaving traditional employment, leaving the pension, the career path, all these things that you've put time into? Well, maybe there's a risk to that, but I would say very often, Sherry, when you want to go for something big in life, there's a huge risk of not going for it, right? What is the risk of living with resentment or living with wonder or, living with a knowledge that, hey, here's this thing I really wanted to do and I didn't try it. I think that's kind of what can lead people into not doing very well, or again, just living with a lot of regret. And sometimes you have a small window to go for something. I also think that sometimes we fail to realize what is the worst consequence if this thing doesn't work out. So, on the one hand, you could say, if I go self-employed and it doesn't work out, I'll be in shambles, living in a van down by the river with Chris Farley or something. Probably the story I like to tell myself is if things don't work out on this path that I'm going to try, I can go back. Maybe I'm not going to get the exact same teaching job I had because that position is probably filled, but I bet I can find something similar because I believe in myself to make it work out. So anyway, I think a lot of times, people find themselves on a certain path, and it takes a lot of courage to make the change or to, as we say, quit. I'd like to say re-choose. Sometimes that's a hard and courageous thing to do, and it ends up working out pretty well.
Actually, it's exactly one of the things that I say in my mantra is you're exactly where you believe you should be. And it's that
Mm.
belief
Hmm.
system, Travis, that I really liked
Yep.
going through in your book. And the belief in responsibility and following what is part of the rule setting. One of the stories in the book that really hit me, and I felt the pain with you, was when you had lost a crampon
Mm.
and you knew that you were supposed to get it. And I know you'll tell the story a little bit better than me, but it actually, it hurt reading it. So can you kind of go back in that moment of what, for our listeners, what really was the story about,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
why did you ultimately turn around and go for it and go back and get it?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Yeah, that's a fun story. This was an ultra running race I was doing in the Alps in France. I mean, geez, almost 10 years ago now. But for me, it was a big race. It wasn't. People may know of the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc (UTMB). That's kind of become the real famous one. This was not the UTMB, but kind of a similar sort of thing. I think it was about 100K, through the Alps. Just these incredible mountains in France. We crossed this road like that's a famous Tour de France climb and stuff. So, kind of an epic place. And anyway, I trained really hard for it. I prepared well. I, brought my wife Amy and our two young kids over there, and got the whole family experience. And towards the end of the race, kind of the final descent, I don't know, it's probably, let's say, less than 10 kilometers left. I was flying down this downhill back to town to finish. And I realized that my little pack that I had my mandatory gear in had come unzipped. And I kind of, looked back there and turned it around and realized that, these, crampons, kind of a yak tracks or Catula kind of thing, not a full on mountaineering crampon, but a traction device. It had fallen out, and it said very clearly in the rules, this is mandatory gear, and, you'll be disqualified if you don't have it. And so I, kind of had briefly a freak out moment, and I thought, oh, do I keep going? And I was in a high place, a very, Americans usually don't do that well in these super technical European races that are really steep and a lot of snow and rocks and stuff. So anyway, I was like really pumped at my positioning. And so I stopped, and I just looked around, like maybe it's right there, and I didn't see it. And then I was like, do I go forward? Do I go back? I could literally see the next competitor is sprinting downhill towards me. He's going to pass me here in about 30 seconds if I don't turn around and, try to escape him. And I ultimately made the decision, well, this is the rules say you got to have this. And it was, at least at that moment, less of a, this is the rules, and I might get disqualified or something, and maybe a little more of just like, well, this is the ethics, kind of the sport. So I turned around and I ran uphill, and it turned out I did finally find it, but it was like up there on this snow field. It took me, I think I said in the book how long, I can't remember how much time I lost, but, a number of people passed me, and, felt a little, I had all this momentum, you kind of hype yourself up and try to use those right mindset tools. So you have all the momentum coming into the barn, and you have to, if you have to turn around and go back uphill, you definitely lose some of that psychologically. But anyway, came back down, finished. It turns out they never did a gear check or anything, so I ended up, in the place I had finished. They didn't check anyone else's gear or anything, and it was what it was. Looking
And
back,
go
well,
ahead,
just
Travis.
real briefly, looking back, like I said, 10 years later, at the time, especially when we set a big goal and we put a lot into it and really go for it, the outcome feels like a big deal. Either we hit it or we don't hit the goal or whatever, and the outcome feels like a big deal. My experience is that looking back, the outcome, the place in the race usually isn't that big of a deal. Would my life be any different right now had I gotten, the place I was in or the place that I got after I turned around? I don't think so. I can't think of any tangible difference. And maybe that comes around. If I was going to write the Ultra Mindset 2, there would be a chapter that says the process is the point.
Mm.
That outcome's great, and what outcome does is it gives us a process, but usually the process That's really where the magic and the growth, the happiness, et cetera, come from.
Well said. And that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because in the ultra mindset, it is recognizing there's more to racing, there's more to life
Mm,
than the outcome.
yep.
And when you know ethically that the guidelines are set for a reason, even though they're not going to check, to me, it's kind of like talking to my teenager, saying, hey,
Yeah.
don't run a red light just because there's no one on the road, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are abiding by the guidance, whether or not someone is looking or not. And that's what made me so proud when I thought about, what I have turned around. And as an audience member, I want you to reflect on it. Here is the process in place, and the journey of being fifth or 10th is at play. And the question is, what you're really supposed to do, because they set these things for a purpose. Because, having equipment on any trail at any time could have been very dangerous, especially the type of equipment that, you step on and could really
Mhm.
do damage to another runner. There's a reason for that. And I do respect and feel gratitude that there's people out there like you that do the right thing for the right reason. And sometimes our reality is we know we can get away with it, so we're going to do it. The question is, what does it compromise in your life? And with the ultra mindset, I think that is a piece of the core. And when you said it best, is the process is really the purpose of what you're
Mhm.
doing. And there is that letdown at the end of a race. Many go through it. The race is over.
Yep.
You've trained for 8 months. Describe that feeling and how you kind of get out of the slump, because it parallels with a lot of things in life.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. The post race blues, or I've heard this term astronaut syndrome, right? Where astronauts go to space and then they come back and they're like, "What now? I went to the moon. Like, how could anything compare?" And I do feel like I've never been to the moon, but some of these adventure races and stuff, like you're living it feels like you're living on the edge, and it's a big high for sure. So what is normal life after that? Yeah, it can be tough, and many people experience that in other fields. The business deal, let's say a wedding. You work way up to a wedding, or a college graduation. Any of these milestones, they're great, they're big. It's really important to celebrate, and maybe having a plan in place for afterwards, for mental health, physical wellness, et cetera. That's probably important. I would say when it comes to things like ultra running and adventure racing, it becomes even more dynamic, because not only is there the psychological build followed by a potential fall or slump, as you said, but there's also a physical component, I think, in those races. Whether it's injuries, whether it's joint stuff, whether it's, the kinds of things that chiropractors support people with, or even deeper, as far as dysregulation of the endocrine system, and all kinds of stuff can go wrong. So I think it's important that, I mean, when I started running an adventure racing, like, no one knew this stuff. There was no, or studied it. It was just, you go out there and you beat yourself up, and then you come back and try to adjust. Now we do have better science, and thankfully these things are talked about. But it's good to maybe know that's coming, and think about, for you personally, what are your tools going to be? What are you going to do to keep yourself well? There's kind of like the next up strategy. What is my next goal? What is my next thing? For some people, that can be a helpful tool, a helpful redirection. I do think there's some risk to that, in the idea that there always must be something next, right? Okay, so you had this story. I'm going to be happy when I do X, and then X happens, and then you got your next thing, your next promotion, paycheck, race, podium level, whatever it is. Oh, now I'm going to be happy when I get that thing, right? And then pretty soon you're on this treadmill, and like, you're never happy, you're never satisfied. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I would recommend maybe a little more think ahead. There might be this lull. What am I going to do? What are the things that you talk about in your podcast? What are the tools I'm going to use? Sleep, diet, body work, relationships, exercise. Right? For me, exercise and routine are really important, especially morning exercise. Okay, I finish this thing. Whether it's again the big race or like a book launch. I'm kind of in this funny period right now where our book came out and we're like touring around and it's fun. It takes a lot of energy, it's a lot of work, but it's a fun period. And since I've done it before, I realize it's a window. Like this isn't going to last forever. It's going to be back to normal pretty soon here. So I'm going to need to, okay, let's hone in on that routine. All right, I'm getting up early. I'm going on a run with my dogs, eating a healthy breakfast, taking my kids to school, trying to have that stability, but also, focusing on relationships and then maybe other, mental and physical health concepts that we could talk about.
That does it's very important too, as you see that downshift from the end of a race or an end of something that you've worked so hard for, like a book launch, and being able to have that adrenaline that peaks you up there. Then you start to feel that wavering, almost sadness. It's that grief, or
There's a
loss
loss.
of that. And you hit it really well, because in the past we haven't really dealt with mental health as a lot of times it had this very unfortunate stigma, and that we didn't talk about it because we didn't want anybody to think that maybe we were weak, or it didn't have, I wasn't strong enough to be able to handle myself. And now I think we're starting to open up to having a global mental health crisis is opening up, especially in endurance athlete, because there was a study that came out with the European Physicians Journal, Sports Physician Journal, and it talked about exercise and the use of exercise to boost your mental health. But what happens when you're an ultra marathoner, right? You can't go to, hey, let's go work out. Well, I'm already working out. So now what do I do? So that's where I'd like to take our audience today is, we know that a mental health crisis exists. We've seen it in a plethora of places across the globe talking about it. And it's important for us to destigmatize when you're suffering and you kind of have that shift of mindset that, I'm not where I need to be. You need to get that help that is so necessary. And perhaps, Travis, knowing this is a very intimate moment in your life, is knowing that your dad is suffering with Alzheimer's. Can you talk to us about where your mental health crisis started, and when you recognized it, what did it look like for you, where you knew you needed some assistance?
No, sure, great question. I think the act of asking for help, that takes courage. That's kind of, we talked before about, quote, quitting, or maybe we could call it re-choosing. Sometimes that's the best decision, and that takes a lot of courage. And asking for help, that's actually the courageous and strong thing to do. I think you're right about destigmatizing, and just the fact that we're sitting here talking about it. Hopefully someone will listen to this, and it'll make you, the listener, think about your own experience and what are your next steps, the right next steps. That's going to be personal for you. But my experience, and again, I'm not trying to be a mental health professional. I'm only speaking from my own experience as an athlete and as a coach of athletes, and as a father and son. But it's a team journey, and you're not in it alone. And that's a key step, because things like anxiety and depression can make people feel so lonely and isolated. And it's just important to keep remembering and telling ourselves and each other that you're not alone. And this is a team game. My own mental health journey, I like to start with a key moment for me was in 2011 or 2012. The former professional cyclist Tyler Hamilton released a book, and this was essential for me because he was the first male role model as a pro athlete, who is someone I looked up to when I was a kid and teenager, watching him race bikes on TV. And in his book, he talked about his own journey with anxiety and depression and the strides that he took with therapy, with medication, with lifestyle, all these things. And for me, that was huge, even in just realizing like, boy, looking within, how am I doing? How am I mean, it took me, Sherry, probably till, well into my 30s to even be able to use the word anxiety to describe this sensation that I often encountered and had been encountering regularly and significantly throughout my life. And I think that's changing. I think kids these days, just because of the environment and what they grow up with, I think are more well versed in talking about their own feelings, and that's great. That's for boys, for girls, for anyone. I think that's great. So anyway, that was for me kind of a first step, and then probably another significant step, Sherry, would have been around 2015 or 16, where it ties into what we said. I had this book launch, and then maybe a bit of a lull afterwards. You put something out there and it makes you feel special. That's a reason that people strive for awards, for the promotion, for the money, for the car. Often it's this feeling of like, I'm special. I've realized that, like, is it more important to feel special or to like be happy and be well? I'd probably take the latter. But anyway, I had this feeling of like feeling special. Oh, the book came out. I was also running a ton, really focused on ultra running. And in hindsight, I think that I probably overcooked it a bit. There's these terms like overtraining syndrome, endocrine fatigue. Basically the nervous systems get thrown off. Lots of things can get messed up, but I think I was overdoing it. And those things, along with, I would say, the stress of being a young parent, being a lot of time at home with two young kids, which hadn't sort of been my story or plan growing up. It was a lot. It just kind of it became a sense of overwhelm. And I think people listening to this, you may think of, whether it's now or in the past, times in your own life where it's just like, man, the level, maybe it's not one specific thing, but the level of all these things, it's adding up, and it's like it's more than I can handle. So I've always loved reading, listening to podcasts, audiobooks, and, felt fairly, I was coaching adult endurance athletes. So I felt fairly versed on a variety of topics or tools. But that was the first time I reached out and I picked up the phone to call a psychologist, Dr. Doug Jowdy, based in Boulder. He's a mental health professional who works with athletes and works with regular people. And, I found his profile online. I was like, I think this guy will be good. And he really helped me. I started meeting with him on a regular basis, talk therapy kind of stuff, CBT, who knows what his other strategies and stuff were, but it's therapy, going to therapy on a regular basis. And it really helped me. I made some good progress. At some point, I don't know, maybe after like probably a year or two of that, I realized that I wanted to consider more. I was looking within myself, realizing that I was using alcohol too much for my comfort level as a tool to relieve mostly anxiety on a daily basis. It'd become a tool. My family has a significant history of addiction and alcoholism, and I wasn't by any standards drinking a ton or anything, but for me, it was like, this could be the start of a path I don't want to go down. And maybe another option I have, and instead of that, maybe is to explore mental health medication. And that was the first time I started using an SSRI, and have continued to, as one of the tools that fits into a whole bunch of other holistic and lifestyle kind of things. So that was kind of the
Travis,
start.
that I think is the key, is that you're recognizing where you, the individual, sits, and having those cognitive behavioral therapy moments and starting to reflect now, because there's always a pivotal point in our life where our health has to be our number one, because we really can't help anyone if we
Yeah.
can't be
Yep.
at our best. And that's why I wanted to have this authentic moment, because sometimes people reflect too late that I should have, would have, could have, but there is no late in anyone's life if you
Yep.
can reflect on the help can be right now. And just listening to this podcast can be that moment where you reflect, just like you did, Travis, is I'm going to pick up the phone today. Today is my day that I'm going to go on the journey of trying to explore my family, what it meant for them in recognizing that addiction was there, and just reflecting as an individual. I do not want that to be part of my future. I want a better future for my family, for myself, and I want to be the ultra mindset that helps to create a what I always like to say is the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. It's something that my mom always told me is when you
Yep.
build this positive, always looking for better mentality, the people that surround you encourage you, they support you. But when you ignore your mental health or you ignore your physical health, then you start to petrify, like that tree starts to rot from the inside out. And we
Yep.
need to grow every day. It's about the growth mindset. And that's part of your ultra mindset in this book. And that moment of picking up the phone was to me what shifted you, recognizing
Yeah.
where you don't want to be and where you want to push the envelope. And you talked about, the holistic portion, the non-pharmacological approach as well. And for those that are listening, there's plenty of options. We just got to pick the one that's right for you. And one of them for Travis, because we have shared this previously together, is that you surrounded yourself with people that are in the healthcare profession that could help you manage both your mental and physical well-being. Can you kind of explore that more deeply with our
Yep.
audience?
Yeah. Yeah. Sherry, you're right on with all that. And I let me just build on that real quick. Like that, sometimes we have this idea, especially those of us who, we like to strive or we perceive ourselves as high achievers or whatever. We have this idea, I'm strong, hammer, 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 full speed. I'm just gonna, keep going. And then when it comes to something like wellness, we're like, I can handle it. I can do it myself, right? I don't need help. That's another principle from the book regarding ego is when it's time, set that ego aside, because in my experience, the strong thing to do was, like you said, pick up that phone and ask for help. And what it came down to was less of like, oh, can I keep on wading through this on my own and, persevering or whatever. It was less about me and it was more about my first responsibility here is to my family, and to be the best for my family I need to do this to help myself so that I can show up for them in the best way possible. And if you're listening to this, you have someone relying on you. Think of that person when you're considering, whether or not you're going to set your ego aside and empower yourself to be the best possible. Yeah. So anyway, on to what was your next question?
We're looking at the holistic, the more
Yes.
balanced
Oh yeah, surrounding
physical and
yourself. Yeah.
mental surrounding
Yeah.
of help.
Yeah, yeah, the team's crucial. I mean, my view, again, this is just my view, my own experience. When it comes to mental health, Sherry, I think it's paramount, and I think it's an all hands on deck approach. So you're doing all these things, you're exploring different things that fit with your view, your style, your honestly your location, your insurance. Like there's a lot of variables, but I think having a team, hopefully that starts with your family, that for me, starting with close male friends with whom I could talk about this stuff was huge. And I have often found that in most cases, when I try to disclose or choose to disclose, either way, if it's with one friend or maybe in a small group, challenges I'm going through, usually maybe other people aren't going through the exact same thing, but man, they are. And especially for guys, traditionally, these are things that have not been talked about. So, reach out to your friends, make your friends, choose your friends and colleagues as people who can help you and who you can help. And then professionals as well. I think professional sport, like I said, I've talked about psychologists and talk therapists. One thing I find to be just kind of a bummer and a challenge is most people who most psychologists and most therapists, maybe it's an LCSW or something, they can't prescribe a medication as well. So if someone is interested in pursuing medication, it's usually going to be there are some people who can do both. Often it'll be a two-pronged approach, and it's gonna be a journey. You're gonna have to figure out with your insurance, man, who's covered, who's not. Are you paying out of pocket? Like this stuff, it takes work, it takes money, and it's worth it.
It
So
is. It takes
there's
time too. Is I kind of
yeah.
wade through your journey on the time element, and I reflect on some of the other podcasts that you've done on being able to take the time as an example. You talked a little bit about sound baths, and maybe you could share your experience in some of the more holistic areas that
Mhm.
you've tried, and what was working for you, and how did you know? Did you know immediately this is working for me? And why did you try it? Because so many people are like, there's only one way to do this. And I
Yeah.
think I think in the mental health aspect, there is a variety of ways
Mhm.
to do things. And I don't truly believe that there's no wrong way if you're asking for help and you're getting professional opinions, is
Yep.
that you are on exactly what you said. This is a journey for me. And how do I know that I'm healing? That's one of the core principles of mental health, is how do you
Yeah.
know you're healing? So share with me some of the experiences that maybe you thought, well, I don't really know, but I'm going to try it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, one other piece is body work, and that's not just because a lot of our audience is chiropractors, but my best body worker is a guy, Jeff Jewell. I think I shared he passed away from cancer, but he is a guy whose influence has stuck with me because I would go and while he's digging into my back with his elbow, I'm writhing in pain. These are athletic massages. The things that he said made me feel good about myself. And he wasn't trying to be a psychologist. He wasn't using, CBT or anything like that, but just his presence, his aura, that connection, it made me feel good. So try to find those people. And I think that connection of the physical and spiritual and emotional connection that you can get with body work is huge. So as far as other things, other tricks and tools for me, I like to, when I hear the word trick or tool or hack, sometimes I'm a little leery because you hear those a lot, especially in the podcast world. And I host a podcast and I I love podcasts. It's a great way to learn, but everything is, 10 hacks for like this or that or whatever. And I think like, my personal view, like instead of trying to go to 10 hacks, like why don't you choose two or three or four like real foundational pieces and really focus on those. And if and when those are going well, then you can move on to this quote hack or that strategy or that tool. So for me, when it comes to mental health, and it's really tied in with the physical, I mean, those foundational pieces: sleep, diet, relationships, and experiences. Like for me, if those things are going well, and honestly, most of us, we have a lot going on. You got your job, you got your family, you got whatever. Um, it, I think sometimes people they feel busy and they neglect some of those foundational principles in
Yes.
order to, I'm going to do this hack, right? I'm going to do this little whatever it is. And I'm not saying these hacks or whatever are bad. A lot of them are good, and but I would think of them. If you have four or five things, like those probably add up to the 90%, right? And then you can, once, if you're at 90 or if you're at 85, then you can add in these other little additional pieces that can each give you, another 2 or 3% or something like that. So I mean, for me, like I said, a stability, a morning routine every day. I wake up and I, while my espresso machine is heating up, I do some yoga. It's not like anything polished. I'm not a yogi, and I wouldn't even call it a practice, but it's, this little routine I do. And my dogs come over, and like I pet my dogs while I'm doing my yoga. And it's a really good way for me to start. And I also have kind of a little journal thing. It's a calendar item on my phone. And before I get into checking email or text or anything, I read that. And it's these like positive mantras that I've written out that hopefully can start my day with positive stories in my head. And sometimes there are negative ruminations. Sometimes there's tough stuff going through. And sometimes I can tell myself, well, I don't have to believe everything that I think, and I can kind of make that decision. Sometimes it's a little harder to shake those things. Sometimes some of those negative stories aren't shaken off maybe until I actually get outside and exercise, which for me, honestly, I don't call it a hack, because for me this is a foundational piece, is going outside and exercising and doing that alone or with my dogs, with other people, whatever, but always with nature. For me, that's a huge foundational piece.
It is important to have reflections. And the one thing that I think oftentimes gets missed in mental health care is outcome. What do people expect? Because there is no perfect life. And if there was,
Yeah.
someone would be showcasing it right now. And we've already lived thousands of years on this earth, and no one has said, other than a few very experiential leaders, and one has been involved in the Holy Bible and others in other religions. But honestly, there's no perfect way to do this, but there is objectives that need to be met in mental health, and the objectives
Yep.
start with what are you doing for yourself at the very base limit? And you're right, going to the essentials is critical. And you wrote in your ultra mindset as one of them, think about what you're thinking. And I love that. What and
Yeah.
why? Think about it. And perhaps just expand a little bit, because it goes really nicely with what you just said. And the
Yeah.
ultra mindset, for people that are suffering, or even they just want to get another ounce out of their life, the creating this ultra mindset pushes that boundary for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And it's a tool. Another thing about strategies and tools we use, sometimes they have a shelf life, right? Something works real well for a period, and then it kind of tinkers out, and maybe you're done with the ultra mindset and you go on to, I don't know, listen to more of Sherry's podcasts, or try some other things. Keep trying it. At least for me, like I like to grow and learn, and I kind of have trouble staying with one thing for too long. So yeah, use the tools with shelf lives. But back to your question, yeah, the stories we tell ourselves, they do make a difference. Like I said, one of my mantras is, I don't have to believe everything I think. Another thing in that little daily journal I read is that depression and anxiety may have seats in the car, but they don't get to drive. And that helps me kind of separate from, okay, here's me, here's my true self, you might call it, like with kind of an IFS framework. And here's these other things, this depression, anxiety, maybe that's part of me, maybe they're things that I can soothe and or change, but I'm not going to let them make decisions for me. And so that's, one of the chapters in the book, good stories, bad stories, the ones you tell yourselves make all the difference. If readers want, they can check it out on audio or print. I would, if you're listening to this and you really want to have that fully engaged experience, get the print and do the worksheets, because that's where they're called. I'm not a huge fan of worksheets in school, because it's like, kind of a cop out for the teacher sometimes, but they're called worksheets because the word is work. And again, if you want to identify these, let's say 3, 4, 5 things in your life that are going to be your foundations, it's going to take work. And that's why I would say maybe put the work into those big things before you start going towards, the hacks or whatever.
Yes, the big things. The big things
Yeah.
is just even going back to Stephen Covey. If you want
Yeah.
to
Yep.
fill your life in a
Uh,
fulfilling way,
yeah.
put the big things in the jar first, and the other things will come if you have the time or the patience for them. But the
Yeah.
big things, the foundational pieces, have to be there. And as you walk through life in the balance of what many healthcare providers will say, especially chiropractic, is Balance comes from stability, and that means it has to be both mental and physical. And when you see one of them struggling, you need to take that moment to reflect on what are you going to do to get it back in alignment, and don't ignore
Yep.
it, because the more you ignore it, oftentimes the body will compensate because it's a masterful machine, masterful. But what gets compensated is often the relationships in your life when it's mental health, or what gets compensated when it's a physical reality that could have been one adjustment from a chiropractor, relieving the pain, restoring the function, and or increasing your well-being in general, because many people come for lots of things like sleep problems.
Mm-hmm.
But it's being able to create an understanding of what my balance is today. Am I dealing with it? And recognizing if you deal with it, you may not have to deal with it again in the future, is that this too shall pass. And there is a clause in there. There's a clause, because people say that phrase and it makes me angry because they don't use the asterisk. This too shall pass if you're willing to deal with it. If you're willing to do
Yeah.
the hard work. The worksheets are that for a reason. You have
Mm-hmm.
to work at it. It's not given unto you until you ask, and then you shall receive. If you don't knock, the door won't open. It's just never going to
Yep.
happen. So if
Yep.
you do seek, like seeking a podcast guest like yourself, they will appear at the time that you need them. And that's really significant when you're suffering with anxiety or depression, or an injury or a life challenge has had its pinnacle, like one a mile at a time is launched, and now it's sharing the good word, the messaging that you have. And my last question, because you're so generous with your time and I love having you with me, is as you look at your life now and you contemplate the many changes that you have made, and you look at your athletes that you're helping with, what are maybe one or two things that you find yourself frequently saying because people need that information? What
Mm-hmm.
contemplating, you've written two books, you're now the father of two children, and there's a common theme many of us see. What would be those common themes that could help someone listening today?
Yeah. Yeah. For a lot of my athletes, and I think maybe this may apply to, the typical American striver, the more, faster, faster, faster. And believe me, I've spent a whole lot of time in that mindset. Uh, it is more sleep, better eating, and for many athletes, more recovery. There's a lot of athletes who are overtraining and or doing the wrong training, or maybe too much of the wrong training, and that's holding them back from improvement, or worse at times, digging into these holes, whether it's acute injury, the knee, the back, the foot, whatever, or something maybe even deeper as far as overtraining syndrome, endocrine fatigue, etc. So honestly, as it turns out, Sherry, a lot of my role as a coach very often is less of like pushing an athlete, because most of these people, they're motivated people. They have a goal. They want to do this thing. They've tapped into, like, I feel good when I exercise and when I do these cool things with the community, and achieve a goal, or just, or focus on the process and toe the line. That's all there. A lot of my job, it turns out, is helping people maybe do less, or do what's right for them, because it really is what's right for someone else, whether it's chiropractor, business, or whatever. What's right for someone else probably is not right for you. So figure out what's right for you, whether you're doing that alone, or with your friends, or with a coach, or with professionals such as yourself, Sherry. Figure out what's right for you, and at times scale back. And like they say, you know plans are nothing, but planning is everything. So plan really good, and then be a little flexible. And that's why I coach fewer athletes, and for the athletes I coach, it's more attention, more communication. because we're always adjusting and changing, man. Things come up, like, your back starts at me and all my buddies in our 40s, all of our backs hurt now. It's like it's like the Achilles heel of endurance athletes. But something starts hurting, or like work comes up, or your kid's sick, or your kid is struggling with mental health. Well, that's going to have an impact on what's right for you in your training, your racing, whatever. So yeah, those are a few themes that I will add just real briefly. One other strategy that's really helped me, and this goes back to something I said before, for me, less and or no alcohol definitely improves my my mood. And that could be a downstream impact. We know that alcohol affects your sleep. So that may, that may be some of the downstream impact. There may be other deeper things. But for me, that's been a consistent ongoing tool. And honestly, that's been, that's hard for me, but I do realize that it definitely helps.
Thank you for sharing
Yep.
that. It is important, and it's very gracious of you to share your own personal story and your 1 mile at a time with your dad's Alzheimer's journey, and also a ultra mindset that really can help us. They always say it's the books you read, the people you meet, and the places you go that will make you the person you will be. So it is a blessing to have you today, Travis, and thank you for sharing your incredible story.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. I really appreciate it. Like I said, thank you for the work that you do and for being you, making an impact. I've really enjoyed this, and great to connect with your audience. My dad and I do a podcast as well. People can check that out if they enjoy podcasts.
Outstanding. I want to thank you for tuning in to Adjusted Reality as we spoke to Travis Macy about the ultra mindset, about mental health. And it gives us time to reflect. Give yourself the gift of time first. Check in. Where are you right now in your life? What would you like to see improved? Now, if you're struggling with your mental health, today is that day that you reach out, that you do something different to get answers, to get the help that you need. And there is a team out there ready, willing, and able to support you. Is that each day it can be a challenge. Balance your mental and physical journey that you're on. It can bring greatness and it can bring the challenges. And the true importance is to balance the load. And that's really the key to an adjusted reality. This podcast was brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. And as a special gift for listening today, you can visit f4cp.org/health to get a copy of our Mind, Body, Spirit ebook, which focuses on many ways to optimize your health and the ones you love without the use of drugs or surgery. Don't forget to subscribe, share the podcast with friends and family. That, my friends, is how we grow, how we reach more people, and how we have all a better life. You can rate and review. We appreciate you. If you're feeling so inspired to learn more about chiropractic or to find a doctor of chiropractic near you, visit f4cp.org/find-a-doctor. And if you have a fantastic chiropractor, when was the last time you saw them? That's right, you can find that adjustment right around the corner if you need it. So please, we appreciate your support, and I am sincerely looking forward to checking in with you again soon.